This is Matt Martin. Sitting in with me is Rob Snyder, and we're going to jump directly to the phones where we've got Congressman Arrington. Congressman Arrington, how's it going?
Matt, as well as it can be considering, wish we could have gotten to that magic Easter date where we were starting to relax things and get back to normal, but the circumstances and the data and the advisors to the president who on infectious diseases and what have you suggested otherwise. I'm glad the president was willing to do what he thought was best for the country and for the safety of the citizens, but it's certainly, disappointing that we're going to have another couple of weeks, it seems, of this current posture.
So, Congressman, the president said that it looks like maybe a couple more weeks and we'll be over the hump. I guess that's kind of the numbers he's looking at. Does he have information, I guess, coming out of China and other places that seem to be pointing to that kind of those dates?
Yeah, I think they're seeing other countries and the sort of ebb and flow and where it peaked and started ratcheting down. I think China is hard to discern because they cover up so much, and you can hardly believe much of what's coming out of China. But yes, I have every reason to believe that we're close to our peak volume, and obviously we've got to continue to manage it so we don't inundate the healthcare system across the board, like we're seeing in New York, like we're seeing in New Orleans. So far, I think it's being managed pretty well. Wish we could have gotten out of the gate a little better, but a lot of that was supply chain problems and America depending on China and other countries for things that we ought to be able to manufacture stateside.
Congressman Rob Snyder here, filling in for Dave today. You mentioned the Chinese and the overall supply chain. Do you think manufacturing will move more from China to North America, whether it's in Mexico or the U.S.? And do you think once this is all over, the president could try to offer some incentives for businesses to bring their manufacturing back to North America from China?
Yeah, Rob, I think this is going to be the story that comes out of this when the dust settles is, why weren't we more aggressive at testing and then sort of targeting groups for quarantine instead of these blanket extreme measures that hurt our economy? The answer will be exactly what you talked about, the supply chain and the dependency on other countries for things that are important to our safety and national security. Yes, it's just like, think about the Farm Bill, because that's the best way to explain it to your listeners. The Farm Bill has incentives in there and safety nets that basically allow us not to be taken over by mass subsidized countries like China and countries that can pay extremely low wages. So we've got a circle drawn around the food supply where we know we're going to always maintain that here. We need to do that with others. And your point about Central and South America, I think there's some opportunity there that will provide a double benefit. One, it keeps things in the North American continent strong. If you just look across the board there, I think it also prevents migration for people that, are looking for basically a better job and way of life and quality of life for their family.
I read a few stories over the weekend about masks, surgical masks that were manufactured in China that made their way to Europe that were essentially not made up the spec and had to be tossed. Is there any concern from the CDC on those supplies from China that have made their way to the U.S., and if any of those are going to be spot tested?
I have not heard that there is a concern stateside with Chinese products in the way of the personal protective equipment. We're obviously converting lots of manufacturing through this Defense Procurement Act, where we're making much of that here. And then, of course, we had the stockpile. And my understanding is that there is not a quality issue with those, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think there's always been concern, a pervasive concern with things made in China, whether it's lead in the paint or the quality of their agriculture product, the safety of their supply. There's always been concern. I just hadn't heard it specifically as it relates to these masks.
Congressman, one other thing about Chinese goods coming out, one of the problems that we were having was we were not sure we were going to be able to get all the things needed for medication, especially some medications that could be crucial. Is everything back to normal as far as getting what we need from China from that aspect?
Yeah, relatively speaking, it is. The purchase agreement from the phase one of the China trade agreement that we were talking about before the virus is there. It has not been interrupted from my understanding, and of course the supply of medicine and the materials for medicine and medical equipment is back to some normalcy there. But again, long term, we can't rely on China for these important products.
Have you talked to any of your colleagues from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state? The president over the weekend brought up a possible quarantine for those three states. I guess what are their thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts then on if those three states are quarantined, what about the rest of the country?
Well, I think we need to be strategic and not have this sort of blanket approach to policies and guidance for various communities. Everybody's different, and we should respond reasonably to what's happening on the ground. Certainly the hottest spots are the areas you just mentioned, and they require a little more extreme measures. The president laid off of the sort of federally mandated quarantine and allowed the state and local guys to kind of drive it, which I think is appropriate. But you do have interstate commerce, so you do have the issue of things that flow across other states. So I do think there's a national interest there. I think the president's right to be reluctant to use that. I think we'll see in the next week or two if that has to be enhanced or if what he did was, sufficient.
Okay. Congressman, we're going to go ahead and take a break here so that we have a little more time on the other side. Nancy Pelosi's been talking about the $2 trillion and that's not going to be the end of it. And also what's in the bill. We want to kind of get into some of that stuff as well.
You got it.
All right. We'll be right back after these messages. This is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We've got Congressman Arrington on line one.
So, Congressman, as we went to break, Matt had brought up the $2.2 trillion stimulus that y'all were able to approve to breakneck speed last week. I guess give everybody the rundown on that, and then Matt's other point on that was the possibility of a fourth stimulus.
Well, let me first say that it's too much money. The price tag was too high. There were some problems with it that I have serious concerns about. But on whole, there are some good things that it will accomplish, and it was, I think, absolutely necessary for our small businesses to get these bridge loans and all distressed industries who by no fault of their own have been impacted. What we need is to rebound from this in a way that gets us back to where we were, and we need to reduce the number of people that go on unemployment, and we need to prevent a long-term recession. So I think it was needed, Rob, and I do have some consolation that the policies in there were temporary. They will automatically sunset. There's no permanent new entitlement programs. We staved off some of the worst partisan provisions that Pelosi wanted to include, like pension bailouts and amnesty and federal takeover of elections. And then the preponderance of the monies for businesses are loans that will be paid back. So on balance, on whole, I think this will do the good that it was intended to. I'm not interested in phase four. We just put $2 trillion out. It needs to work its way through the system, helping the frontline workers, because a big chunk of it was for health care, safety net sort of strengthening for the unemployment insurance, because we've seen the highest jobless claims that we've ever seen as a nation, over almost 3 million last week. So, again, I'm not interested in phase 4 when phase 3 was just passed. We need to see how it works, where it's being absorbed. And, if there are some targeted gaps or holes, that's one thing. But I am not looking at a phase 4, and I'm not interested in a phase 4.
Do you think a lot of your colleagues feel the same?
I got the same question earlier this morning. I think my Republicans colleagues feel the same in the House. But I don't think the majority of the House, which is Democrat, run by Nancy Pelosi, they want another bill because there are a whole host of things that are unrelated, non-germane to a disaster relief and recovery package that they want to include. As far as the Senate, I don't know. I just know that they're going to have Democrats involved to get that 60 vote. So I don't see a lot of good coming out of it. I think we were lucky to get to get the funding package that we got with the least amount of damage, quite frankly.
So there's been a lot of, reports that Nancy Pelosi tried to put the Green New Deal in the first package. Do you see that being something that she's going to try to throw together a second time?
There is absolutely no limit to her political opportunism, and I say that, but it's for the whole world to see. Look at the bill she dropped that made this disaster bill that we just passed stall out because of all this non-germane policy and partisan ideological issues like the ones I mentioned. So she's not going to stop. She's looking for ways to advance this democratic socialist agenda. Unfortunately, there's a time and place to debate those. It's not in a disaster recovery bill. That's when we're trying to help hurting Americans and help this economy respond to a crisis that's unprecedented.
Congressman, we've got about 90 seconds left. I was going to go ahead and give you the floor to basically cover any other points that you wanted to talk about with the coronavirus and what the president is doing.
Well, just stay vigilant. We've got a couple of weeks here where everybody's got to do their part so we can get through this. I'm confident we will prevail, and we'll learn some lessons like the supply chain. Just remember, support local restaurants and retailers right now. They need it the most. And thank a healthcare worker and pray for the country.
All right.
Thank you, Congressman Arrington.
You bet. Good to be with you guys. God bless. Go West Texas.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll be back here at here in about after a check of news and weather with Izzy from Sharpshooters. They have some really cool things going on out there, and I guess we got a few questions for them about their business, how that's working right now as well. So we'll have all that after the break. And this is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. I'm Matt Martin. Sitting with me is Rob Snyder, and we'll be right back.